ADX Florence is considered the most secure prison in the United States and is often described as the toughest prison in America. Officially known as the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, it was opened in 1994 in the state of Colorado. The prison was specially designed to hold inmates who are considered extremely dangerous, violent, or high risk to national security. Many prisoners sent there have committed serious crimes such as terrorism, organized crime, espionage, or repeated acts of violence inside other prisons. What makes ADX Florence different from ordinary prisons is its extreme level of security and isolation. The prison was built to prevent escapes and reduce communication between inmates. Prisoners spend about 23 hours every day inside small concrete cells that are heavily monitored by guards and cameras. The cells are soundproof, making it difficult for inmates to communicate with each other. Even the windows are designed so prisoners can see only the sky and a small part of the outside world, preventing them from knowing their exact location within the prison. Every movement inside ADX Florence is strictly controlled. When inmates leave their cells for exercise or medical visits, they are usually handcuffed and escorted by multiple officers. Recreation time is often spent alone in small enclosed areas instead of open prison yards. Meals are delivered directly through slots and steel doors, removing almost all face-to-face interaction. Because of these harsh conditions, ADX Florence is sometimes called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The prison is famous for housing some of the most notorious criminals in American history. Supporters believe such strict security is necessary to protect society and prison staff, while critics argue that long-term isolation can seriously damage mental health and human dignity. One of the most well-known and controversial aspects of life inside ADX Florence is the extreme isolation experienced by inmates. Prisoners are kept inside their cells for nearly 23 hours every single day, with very little human contact. This level of isolation is one of the main reasons ADX Florence is considered a Supermax prison rather than an ordinary correctional facility. The cells themselves are small, heavily secured, and built almost entirely from concrete. Each cell usually contains a concrete bed, a desk, a stool, a sink, and a toilet. The design is meant to reduce opportunities for violence, escape attempts, or communication between inmates. Thick walls and solid steel doors prevent prisoners from seeing or speaking easily to others nearby. Even the windows are narrow and positioned in a way that limits the outside view. Most inmates eat, sleep, read, exercise, and spend their entire daily routine inside the same confined space. Human interaction is extremely limited and usually happens only through brief conversations with guards or prison staff. Meals are passed through slots in the cell doors, reducing direct contact even further. Unlike regular prisons, inmates rarely participate in group activities, communal dining, or social programs. The 1 hour inmates may spend outside their cells is also highly controlled. Recreation usually takes place alone in a small enclosed concrete area, sometimes called a dog run. Prisoners are searched, handcuffed, and escorted by officers whenever they leave their cells. The strict schedule and controlled movement are designed to maintain maximum security at all times. Living in near total isolation for years can have serious psychological effects. Many experts and human rights organizations argue that prolonged solitary confinement can lead to anxiety, depression, hallucinations, emotional breakdowns, and difficulty communicating with others. Some former inmates have described the experience as mentally exhausting because of the silence, loneliness, and lack of normal social interaction. Supporters of the system argue that such strict confinement is necessary for inmates who are considered extremely dangerous or who have committed violent acts in other prisons. They believe isolation helps prevent attacks on guards, prison riots, gang communication, and escape attempts. Critics, however, believe that keeping human beings isolated for such long periods raises major ethical and human rights concerns. Inside ADX Florence, inmates do not experience meals the way prisoners do in most ordinary prisons. There are no large cafeterias, no shared tables, and almost no social interaction during eating times. Instead, every meal is delivered individually through a narrow slot built into the heavy steel door of each inmate's cell. This small detail reflects the prison's overall philosophy of strict control, isolation, and maximum security. The food delivery process is carefully organized and highly controlled. Correctional officers move through the prison corridors with secured food carts while inmates remain locked inside their cells. The tray is passed through the slot, often called a food port, without the inmate ever leaving the room. Once the tray is inside, the slot is immediately locked again. This system minimizes direct contact between inmates and prison staff while reducing the risk of violence or attacks. Unlike traditional prisons where inmates may talk, socialize, or interact during meals, prisoners at ADX Florence usually eat alone in complete silence. Meals become part of the isolation that defines daily life inside the Supermax facility. Eating, which is normally a social activity in human life, becomes another controlled routine carried out in solitude. Many experts believe this constant isolation can intensify feelings of loneliness and emotional stress over time. The prison uses this meal system as a security measure. Many inmates housed at ADX Florence have histories of violence, gang leadership, terrorism, or escape attempts. By preventing group dining, prison officials reduce opportunities for fights, organized attacks, communication between inmates, or the passing of contraband. Even simple routines such as eating are designed around maintaining order and preventing security threats. The meals themselves are usually served on durable trays designed for prison use. Inmates return the trays through the same slot after eating. Every movement is monitored closely by correctional staff. In some cases, prisoners who break rules or display dangerous behavior may face additional restrictions related to meal privileges or commissary access. For many inmates, the emotional impact of eating alone every day can be severe. Former prisoners have described the experience as mentally draining because meals no longer feel like part of normal human life. Without conversation or interaction, eating becomes another reminder of the extreme separation from society and the outside world. Over months and years, this repetitive isolation can affect an inmate's emotional well-being and sense of connection to others. The meals served inside ADX Florence are designed to meet basic nutritional needs rather than provide enjoyment or comfort. Food inside the prison is usually plain, repetitive, and carefully controlled. Unlike restaurants or home-cooked meals where people can choose flavors and variety, inmates at ADX Florence follow a strict meal schedule with limited options. The purpose of the prison food system is efficiency, discipline, and maintaining order within a high-security environment. Breakfast often includes basic items such as oatmeal, cereal, bread, fruit, and milk. Lunch may consist of sandwiches, beans, rice, or small portions of protein along with vegetables. Dinner typically includes simple foods like pasta, potatoes, rice, cooked vegetables, and a small serving of meat such as chicken or beef. Portions are measured carefully to meet federal nutritional standards while controlling costs and maintaining consistency across the prison system. One major feature of prison meals is repetition. The menu follows a planned cycle, meaning inmates often eat the same types of food again and again over weeks and months. This repetitive routine reflects the highly structured environment inside ADX Florence, where nearly every part of daily life follows strict schedules and regulations. Unlike people outside prison who can enjoy different cuisines and personal food preferences, inmates have very little control over what they eat. The food is also intentionally simple in preparation and presentation. Meals are not designed to be luxurious or highly flavorful. Seasonings and special ingredients are usually limited. Prison officials focus on serving meals that are safe, affordable, and easy to distribute securely throughout the facility. Because inmates remain isolated in their cells, meals must also be packaged and delivered in ways that reduce security risks. For many prisoners, food becomes one of the few daily events that breaks the monotony of isolation. Even though the meals are basic, inmates may still look forward to mealtimes because they provide structure during long hours spent alone. Some prisoners use commissary purchases, when allowed, to supplement their meals with snacks, coffee, instant noodles, or packaged foods. However, access to commissary items depends on inmate behavior and prison regulations. Former inmates and prison experts have often described the meals as emotionally unsatisfying because they lack variety and social interaction. Eating the same kinds of food repeatedly in isolation can increase feelings of boredom, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. Over time, the repetitive nature of prison meals becomes another symbol of the strict and controlled environment that defines life inside ADX Florence. Inside ADX Florence, food serves a much larger purpose than simply feeding inmates. Every meal is carefully planned to provide the minimum nutritional requirements needed for health and survival, but comfort, enjoyment, and personal choice are not priorities. In a Supermax prison environment, food is also used as a tool of order, discipline, and institutional control. Prison officials design meal plans according to federal dietary guidelines to ensure inmates receive enough calories, vitamins, and nutrients. The meals are meant to keep prisoners physically healthy and able to function, but they are intentionally basic and limited in variety. The prison system focuses on practicality and efficiency rather than taste or satisfaction. Meals are prepared in large quantities, distributed on strict schedules, and standardized so that every inmate receives similar portions and food items. At ADX Florence, control is one of the most important aspects of prison management, and food plays a role in maintaining that control. Mealtimes follow precise schedules each day, creating a routine that inmates are expected to obey, without exception. The process of delivering and collecting food trays is highly organized, with officers monitoring every movement. Since prisoners remain isolated in their cells, meals become another part of the prison's tightly controlled daily structure. Food can also be connected to inmate behavior and discipline. Prisoners who follow rules may receive certain privileges such as access to commissary items, while those who break regulations can lose those privileges. Commissary access allows inmates to buy snacks, coffee, instant noodles, candy, or hygiene products, giving food additional importance inside prison life. Because daily life is so restricted, even small food-related privileges can hold significant value for inmates. The lack of comfort in prison meals is intentional. Supermax prisons are designed primarily for punishment, security, and risk management rather than rehabilitation or personal well-being. The repetitive and plain nature of the food reinforces the strict environment of the institution. Inmates have almost no control over when they eat, what they eat, or how the food is served. This loss of personal choice is part of the broader system of discipline that governs every aspect of life inside the prison. For many inmates, food becomes symbolic of the harsh reality of confinement. Meals are eaten alone in silence, often within the same small cell where prisoners spend nearly all their time. Without social interaction, family gatherings, or personal freedom, eating loses much of the emotional and cultural meaning it normally carries in everyday life. Over time, the routine of receiving simple meals through a steel door can strengthen feelings of isolation, monotony, and emotional detachment. Inside ADX Florence, commissary privileges are considered an important part of prison life, even though they are highly restricted and carefully monitored. A commissary is a prison store where inmates can purchase limited personal items such as snacks, instant noodles, coffee, toiletries, writing supplies, and small everyday products. In a place where nearly every aspect of life is controlled, commissary access becomes one of the few privileges inmates may look forward to. However, unlike ordinary shopping outside prison, commissary use at ADX Florence is not unlimited or guaranteed. Access depends heavily on inmate behavior, security classification, and compliance with prison rules. Prison officials use commissary privileges as a management tool to encourage discipline and reduce disruptive behavior. Inmates who follow regulations, cooperate with staff, and avoid violent incidents may retain access to commissary purchases, while those who violate prison rules can lose these privileges temporarily or permanently. Because life inside ADX Florence is extremely restrictive, commissary items often carry much greater emotional and psychological value than they would outside prison. Simple products like coffee, candy, chips, or packaged soups can provide variety in an otherwise repetitive daily routine. For inmates who spend most of their time alone in isolated cells, these small comforts may become highly meaningful. The ability to choose even a few personal items gives prisoners a limited sense of control within an environment where personal freedom is almost completely removed. Prison authorities closely monitor commissary transactions for security reasons. Certain items may be restricted to prevent misuse, trading, or the creation of weapons. Spending limits are usually enforced, and purchases are carefully recorded. Since many inmates housed at ADX Florence are considered extremely dangerous or connected to criminal organizations, officials take extra precautions to prevent communication networks, contraband activity, or manipulation through commissary exchanges. The connection between behavior and privileges is a key feature of the prison's disciplinary system. Commissary access becomes part of a reward and punishment structure designed to maintain order in a highly controlled environment. Inmates who lose commissary privileges may feel the punishment deeply because daily life already lacks comfort, entertainment, and social interaction. Even small restrictions can have a strong emotional impact when prisoners are living in long-term isolation. For some inmates, commissary items also help break the monotony of prison meals. Prison food is often plain and repetitive, so snacks and instant foods purchased from the commissary provide additional flavor and variety. This makes commissary access even more valuable inside the Supermax system. Over time, these limited privileges become part of the larger psychological structure of prison life, where small rewards can greatly influence inmate morale and behavior. One of the most serious concerns about life inside ADX Florence is the psychological impact of long-term isolation. Inmates at the Supermax prison spend nearly all of their time alone inside small concrete cells with extremely limited social interaction. Over months and years, this level of separation from other people can deeply affect a person's mental and emotional well-being. Human beings are naturally social creatures. In normal life, people communicate with family, friends, co-workers, and communities every day. Conversations, shared meals, and social contact play an important role in maintaining emotional balance and mental health. Inside ADX Florence, however, inmates are cut off from most forms of regular human interaction. Meals are eaten alone, recreation is usually done alone, and communication with others is heavily restricted. The silence and repetition of daily life can become emotionally exhausting. Many inmates experience the same routine every day without meaningful social contact or mental stimulation. The lack of conversation and physical interaction may lead to feelings of loneliness, hopelessness, frustration, and emotional numbness. Some former prisoners have described the isolation as one of the hardest parts of surviving life inside the prison. Mental health experts have long warned about the effects of prolonged solitary confinement. Studies suggest that long periods of isolation can contribute to anxiety, depression, panic attacks, insomnia, memory problems, paranoia, and hallucinations. In some cases, inmates may struggle to maintain emotional stability after spending years separated from normal social life. The constant confinement inside small, enclosed spaces can also increase stress and psychological tension. Eating alone every day can intensify these emotional effects. In most cultures around the world, meals are connected to family, friendship, and social bonding. People often gather together to eat, celebrate, and communicate. At ADX Florence, that social experience disappears completely. Food trays are passed through steel door slots, and inmates eat in silence within the same isolated cell where they sleep and spend most of their day. Over time, this repetitive loneliness can make inmates feel disconnected not only from society, but also from normal human experiences. The prison environment itself may also increase mental strain. The concrete walls, limited outdoor exposure, controlled movement, and strict routines create a feeling of constant confinement. Some inmates may lose track of time or struggle with emotional regulation after years in such conditions. Even small interactions with guards or prison staff are often brief and highly controlled. The critics of Supermax prisons argue that extreme isolation can become psychologically damaging and may violate basic human rights. Human rights organizations and mental health professionals have repeatedly questioned whether keeping people in near total solitude for years is humane. They believe that while security is important, the long-term mental consequences of isolation should not be ignored. Supporters of ADX Florence, however, argue that the prison houses inmates considered extremely dangerous, including violent criminals, gang leaders, and terrorists. They believe strict isolation is necessary to protect prison staff, other inmates, and public safety. According to this view, The harsh conditions are designed to prevent violence, organized crime activities, and escape attempts within the prison system. ADX Florence has become one of the most debated prisons in the world because of its extreme conditions and strict security measures. The prison represents a larger debate about how societies should treat dangerous criminals and what limits should exist when it comes to punishment and confinement. Supporters and critics often strongly disagree about whether the conditions inside ADX Florence are necessary for public safety or harmful to basic human rights. Supporters of the prison argue that ADX Florence was created to handle inmates who are considered exceptionally dangerous. Many prisoners housed there have histories of violence, terrorism, gang leadership, organized crime, or repeated attacks inside other prisons. According to prison officials and supporters of the Supermax system, ordinary prisons may not be capable of safely managing such individuals. They believe the extreme security measures at ADX Florence help protect correctional officers, other inmates, and society as a whole. The prison's strict design reflects this focus on security. Inmates are isolated for most of the day, movements are carefully controlled, and communication is heavily restricted. Meals are delivered through steel door slots, recreation is often done alone, and surveillance systems monitor nearly every activity. Supporters argue that these measures reduce opportunities for violence, escape attempts, gang coordination, and criminal communication from inside prison walls. However, critics believe the conditions at ADX Florence go beyond security needs and raise serious ethical concerns. Human rights organizations, mental health experts, and some legal advocates argue that prolonged solitary confinement can cause severe psychological harm. They question whether keeping prisoners isolated for years or decades is morally acceptable, even for dangerous offenders. Critics argue that punishment should not remove a person's basic human dignity or expose them to long-term mental suffering. One of the biggest ethical concerns involves the mental health effects of isolation. Studies on solitary confinement suggest that extreme social deprivation can contribute to depression, anxiety, hallucinations, paranoia, emotional instability, and suicidal thoughts. Critics believe that placing inmates in near-total isolation for extended periods may worsen psychological problems instead of improving behavior or encouraging rehabilitation. The debate also extends to the purpose of prisons in modern society. Some people believe prisons should focus mainly on punishment and security, especially for violent offenders who threaten public safety. Others argue that prisons should also include rehabilitation, mental health treatment, education, and opportunities for personal reform. ADX Florence often becomes the center of this discussion because its environment prioritizes control and security over rehabilitation programs or social interaction. Legal and constitutional questions have also been raised regarding Supermax prisons. Some critics argue that extreme isolation may violate protections against cruel and unusual punishment. Lawsuits and investigations over the years have examined prison conditions, inmate treatment, and mental health care within Supermax facilities. These debates continue to influence discussions about prison reform and correctional policies in the United States. For many observers, ADX Florence represents the tension between justice and humanity. On one side is the responsibility to protect society from highly dangerous individuals. On the other side is the question of how far punishment should go before it becomes harmful or inhumane. The prison continues to spark debate among lawmakers, prison officials, psychologists, human rights activists, and the general public because it forces society to confront difficult questions about crime, safety, punishment, and human dignity. In conclusion, life inside ADX Florence is built around strict security, control, and isolation. From eating alone in small concrete cells to living under constant surveillance, every part of daily life reflects the harsh reality of America's toughest Supermax prison. The food inmates eat may seem like a small detail, but it reveals much larger truths about discipline, punishment, and survival inside the prison system. The conditions inside ADX Florence continue to create strong debates around the world. Some people believe such extreme measures are necessary to control dangerous criminals and maintain public safety, while others argue that long-term isolation and harsh treatment can seriously damage mental health and violate basic human rights. These discussions remind us that prisons are not only about security, but also about ethics, justice, and the treatment of human beings. By understanding what life is like inside ADX Florence, including something as simple as daily meals, we gain a deeper understanding of how powerful prison environments can shape the minds, emotions, and lives of those who live within them.